Welcome to Top Tier Wrestling, your ultimate destination for all things AEW and WWE. Whether you're a hardcore wrestling fanatic or just a casual viewer, we've got you covered with the latest news, in-depth show reviews, and our unfiltered opinions on everything happening in the world of professional wrestling. Join us as we dive into the high-octane action, dramatic storylines, and backstage buzz of AEW and WWE. Get ready to step into the ring with us and stay on top of the wrestling world. This is Top Tier Wrestling. Welcome everyone to TTW. On today's episode, we're going to be giving our impressions and in-depth analysis of AEW's All Out that happened just this past weekend. Sorry it took us a little bit of time, but it's been a busy recording week, and this is as soon as we were able to get to it. But I think everyone's in for a treat because AEW's All Out was absolutely top tier.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're not even going to wait till the end of this to tell you. We're going to tell you right now. It was top tier.
It was top tier. If there was one bit of wrestling that people focused on this past weekend, it should have been AEW's All Out. It was absolutely outstanding. Now we're not going to cover the events of 0 Hour, the pre-show. We're just going to get right into it. And we start AEW's All Out with a massive, like the theme of All Out was grudge match. And we begin and end with two very vicious and fiery grudge matches. And the first one of the night is Daniel Garcia versus MJF. And now it's time for Garcia to get some payback for MJF laying him out by doing a tombstone off the middle rope.
Yep. And it was beautiful.
It was a beautiful. I mean, as matches go, it was a hot start to the night because we immediately end up with just like some vicious high spots, some brutal maneuvers, and some blood, of course. It's AEW, right?
Of course.
But, I mean, that's just enough to whet your appetite because what comes later is an amount of blood and viciousness that is absolutely insane.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if we didn't have a list like in front of us, just showing us like the title or the title card, you know, or the match card, so that we could see, you know, what happened. I would be all over the place. I would be screaming about. I would go from Willow and Statlander to Swerve and I'd be all over the place. So thankfully, there's a list here in front of me showing me so that I can go, oh yeah, and then, and do all that. So yeah, it was exciting. I mean, it was really good. And the Daniel Garcia and MJF match was, I think, the perfect way to start it off. And I also feel like it happened the right way. And I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself here, but I mean, I knew coming into this that MJF was gonna win that match, right? I knew that, but I also didn't feel like who won the match was the most important thing.
No, not at all. And I tend to agree. I don't think. I mean, I suppose they could have had Garcia resort to like hitting MJF with a foreign object or something, but the faces, even in grudge matches, don't tend to resort to such things. And
Yeah.
so after beating each other with like more head traumatizing maneuvers, I mean, I think we
Mhm.
saw a couple of tombstones in that. We saw Canadian destroyers,
Yeah.
like just supreme head and neck damage, or so it would appear in this match.
Yeah.
And Garcia was really bringing it, like in a way that I don't think I've seen Garcia go at somebody before, and that was good
Yeah.
to see. But I
Yes.
think it
Yeah.
would have been very difficult to make it believable that Garcia was going to catch the win on MJF.
Yeah.
Um, and long story short, what happens is as Garcia is going for the super pile driver out of the corner, um, if I recall correctly, they sort of drop to the ground, and at one point the ref is between Garcia and MJF grabs the ref, and then as the referee kind of backs out of being between them, and Garcia closes, MJF hits him with a low blow and then scores the quick pin.
Yeah.
But like you said, the finish of the match really wasn't what was most important because after the match, Garcia went absolutely off on MJF and beat the ever loving hell out of him. Gave him a whole lot of a taste of his own medicine. He ended up
Yeah.
pile driving him off of the middle rope and then grabbing him by the neck and shaking his head in much the same way that MJF had done several weeks before to Garcia.
Yes.
So even though MJF took the win, Garcia got a fair bit of payback. And
Yeah.
it was
And it was
just a
good.
really satisfying match because of it.
Yes. I agree. Um, I also I feel like the storytelling here is good too because it shows that MJF has basically in some way changed Garcia, right? The Garcia that we met when you and I first started watching AEW,
Hmm.
and yeah, back in them days, that Garcia I don't think would have done what he did to MJF at the end of that match.
No,
But
not at all.
the brutality of MJF's attack, couple of months ago or however many weeks ago it happened. I like the storytelling there. He came back, and I mean, he even he was like a little mad. He was like a mad chihuahua, like a mad not chihuahua, but like a mad dog. When he came back, he told everybody like his whole purpose, basically, kind of like a Hangman Adam Page obsession now. Garcia has with MJF, like he just wants to destroy him, or he did. He just wanted to
Yeah,
destroy him, and that was it. And he got just that. And I thought it was you couldn't put him over in this match, right? Like it's way too soon. And I think
yeah,
the last excuse me, the last match that MJF had, don't think he won. Uh, and like the last pay per view that MJF
yeah.
was
No,
in.
yeah, that would be the one where Osprey got his belt back off of MJF. So
Yes,
no,
yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
he had eaten the
So
Tiger Driver 91.
right, so then having MJF in a match with Garcia, and then having Garcia beat him, at the very next pay per view. That, like, if you're down on MJF, sure, but I would not have made that call. So, like I said, coming into
No,
this, I knew that MJF was gonna win this match, and I was okay with that because, like I said earlier, I don't think that was the point. The
no,
destruction that
yep,
Garcia laid out at the end of that match, like, cool, so glad you won, bro, but I'm gonna drop in your head. That that
yeah,
that's what was important. I think that progressed that storyline further, and the development of Garcia. And I love the fact that MJF put him on like that. I
yeah.
enjoyed that. So I'm excited to see more. And Garcia looked good.
He
Like, he
did,
looked
he
good.
did.
We've seen him look hungry before, right? And I like
Yeah,
that. But he looked good. He looked like
no.
damn near a seasoned professional.
This was Well, you made a lot of good points there, and I'd like to address several of them. You said at the beginning, like, how Garcia was when we first started watching. When we first started watching, Garcia was part of the Jericho Appreciation Society, but he
Yeah.
was
Hmm.
like, he was torn between Jericho and the American Dragon, Daniel Bryan, or Bryan
Yes.
Danielson, I guess, as they call him in AEW now. I get those two mixed up because I've heard him both ways for so many years that I forget
Yeah.
which one we're going with. Maybe I'll just go with the American Dragon. But
Yeah. The commentators at AEW, I God bless them. I don't know how they do it.
yeah, I'm sure they've
It's,
probably gotten it
yeah,
wrong
because I
once or
mean,
twice.
especially the ones that have been in WWE and AEW, like it's kind of crazy. You got to say his
Yeah.
name the correct way.
Yep. Now, the point that I wanted to illustrate is
Hmm.
that Danny Garcia went from being like, the argument was, are you a sports entertainer or a pro wrestler? And he was trying to emulate the very
Yeah.
technical style of Bryan Danielson, and it just really wasn't doing him much favors. So I feel like over these past couple years since, we've seen Daniel Garcia become a much more complete professional wrestler.
Yes. Yeah.
And here was one of the first times we've seen Daniel Garcia just vicious, and it was
Hmm.
great. I mean, from the beginning to the end, because the match started with Garcia running and attacking MJF from behind,
Yeah.
like he was absolutely the aggressor, and it's good to see that.
Yep.
That's kind of where he needed to go, and that's what MJF did for him here, and I think it's fantastic. I think this was an incredibly well booked situation. And by having MJF sneak the win, it continues to keep MJF as being that heel who, snatches victory from the jaws of defeat, and that was good.
Yeah.
But then having Daniel absolutely obliterate him after the match, yeah, if I remember it right, MJF went to give him a handshake, and
Yeah.
Garcia
Quote
just
unquote handshake.
kicks him low, in the yam bags, as Taz would say,
Yambag
and
Jones.
Yambag Jones, and then managed to pull off the super pile driver and
Yeah.
choke and beat MJF up in much the same fashion that had been done to him several weeks before, and
Yeah.
it was just an incredibly satisfying match. The in-ring action was excellent, like you said. I know people could argue about it being a storyline or whatnot, but it was a fantastic, like, heated grudge match feud that built up over time, and it was
Hmm.
fantastic to come back to. And for Garcia to get his comeuppance was very satisfying without it requiring MJF be buried and it
Yeah.
becoming unbelievable. Like, it was very well produced and booked.
Yeah, I agree. And for those of you who may have felt bad for MJF getting kicked in the yam bags, he Garcia did shake his hand. Like when MJF stuck his hand out, Garcia did shake it. Now I don't know who was gonna shoot first. I don't know if you know what I mean. I don't know if Garcia had planned to kick him in the yam bags, but MJF tried to kick him in the yam bags again, and he grabbed his leg and then kicked him in the yam bags. So don't feel bad.
Yeah.
MJF is still a see you next Tuesday. He
Yeah.
deserved it.
But he's our see you next Tuesday.
Yeah,
Um,
he is.
no, MJF, his new catchphrase is like, "You'll thank me later," and
Yeah,
I
you could
see
thank
where
me
he's
later.
going with it. He isn't the only one that's doing this. Like, there's an overall tone that has started quite recently of AEW trying to ratchet it up a notch. Like, I feel like MJF is doing all these heel things not necessarily for just him, but he's trying to bring out the most vicious and the most violent and just the best version, I guess you could say. Maybe not. Maybe some people would look at it not as that, but he's trying to get people to really jump up, and he's pulling people up with him.
Hmm.
Um, like, it definitely didn't hurt Osprey to get into a feud with MJF right at the beginning.
No, no, not at all.
And it certainly helps Garcia's clout. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, he is in fact elevating the roster. So I think that's what he means when he's telling people, "You'll thank me later," because he is bringing the product up.
Yeah.
and he's fantastic at it. I think MJF is quite literally, when he calls himself a generational talent, I don't think he's kidding. Now, it's a
No.
different kind of talent than what Will Ospreay is doing, but not by much. Like, MJF can absolutely go in the ring with
Yeah.
anyone.
Oh,
Like, he is
for sure.
really good in ring. But what he brings in terms of his understanding of the psychology of the business, and
Hmm.
trying to get the fans to do one thing or the other. Like, I absolutely believe at this point that MJF could get us to cheer for him in the span of a single show. He could have us cheering for him and booing him, and then back to cheering for him. He has the audience in his hand so absolutely. Like, he just
Yeah.
gets it.
Hmm.
And so it's that level of understanding for the business that really puts MJF on another level, especially considering how young MJF is.
Yeah.
And I mean, the guy could act, he can sing. He's a total package of a sports entertainer. I don't think AEW could ask for more out of
Yeah. I
him.
agree. I agree.
So, uh, for the start of All Out, that was an absolute banger.
Yeah.
And we were like, man, what can we expect if it's been, if this is how they're starting?
Yeah.
But it does in fact get better throughout the night, even from
Yeah.
there.
We had no idea.
Moving on from the fantastic start to the next match, we had it looks like the tag team titles, which was Blackpool Combat Club's uh, Wheeler Yuta and Claudio Castagnoli versus the Young Bucks.
Yeah.
And
Castagnoli.
this was kind of an interesting match in that, like, Castagnoli and Yuta had only been kind of a tag team briefly
Yeah.
since Wheeler Yuta came back, but with Moxley kind of out for a while, and with Brian Danielson being kind of focused on picking up the World Championship belt, that was pretty much all that was left of Blackpool Combat Club.
Mm. Yeah.
Interesting pairing to have go after Nicholas and Matt Jackson for the tag belts.
Mm.
Now, they put up a pretty good fight.
They did. Yeah.
Castagnoli is an absolute beast, and Yuta's actually been stepping up. Like, he
Yuta looked
looks
good.
like
Yeah.
he's been improving, and
He
so
did.
it ended up being quite the match. So I thought it was good. It was a real banger. Um, that said, it ended in about the only way that I think anybody thought it was going to end, which is that the Young Bucks are going to win.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
don't
think
think.
people would have been really shocked if Blackpool managed to pull it off with
Yeah.
sort of a kind of
Very,
throw
very
together
shocked.
team,
Yeah.
when FTR and the Acclaimed have been trying and they haven't done it.
Yeah. And I just didn't see. And I think everybody who saw this match just, it's gonna be a fun match. It was gonna be good. It was nice to see Yuta really bring it. I think we made a joke that Yuta was wrestling like he was like they told him that he was gonna get a golden
Yeah,
sandwich backstage or something.
yeah, and if he didn't wrestle like his life depended on it, no sandwich. So Wheeler
No
was
golden
hungry.
sandwich. Yeah, he was
Yeah,
hungry for it. He was out there working it. But I don't think anybody thought that they were gonna get the belt. But they're like you said, they're just thrown together tag team right now. I don't think it was. Didn't think it was gonna happen. I don't think anybody who was watching the match thought it was gonna happen either. However, they still put on a good show.
yeah,
Everybody looked good. Of course, Matthew and Nicholas are always they're that's probably one of the best tag teams of our generation. Like they're amazing, those two. So it's always
yeah,
good to see them. They did a
yeah.
bang up job, like you said earlier. Castagnoli, he's amazing. Beast mode
Claudio.
engaged. Yeah, yeah. Beast mode engaged. and it's
Hmm.
good to see him in AEW, shining bright like a diamond. Like he looks good here. He does.
Yeah.
Uh, I think they give him a better opportunity to look good too. And it's no dig at any other promotion, but I think he suits AEW better. I think he looks good here.
Well, and I think he has more opportunity to portray himself however he wishes.
Yes, exactly
Um,
that.
and I'll certainly have more to say about Claudio based on the events that happen a little bit later in the card.
Yeah.
Um, but it was a solid match. And if you're at all a fan of the Young Bucks or Yuta or Castagnoli, I think you will be well pleased with it. You get to see Castagnoli, giant spin some folks, and you get all of what the Young Bucks are known for with their really fast tags and acrobatics and just antics in the ring. I mean,
Yeah.
it's good to see because while they've been being the EVPs, there's been a lot less of that, and I don't know if that's because they want to let some other tag teams breathe.
Yeah.
Because I honestly think that if the Bucks went out there and did their thing every single night at the top level that they can perform it at, they would inadvertently bury every other tag team just by outshining them so much.
Yeah.
And that's not a
They would
ding on
certainly
the other
give a
tag teams. It's that the Bucks are just that insanely good.
yeah, they'd certainly give a lot of them a run for their money. Um, I was about to say something that I can't say just yet. Oop, oop. So I'm gonna wait.
Oh, well, moving on from that very solid tag team defense, there wasn't a lot of storyline behind it, so it really sells itself on the action, but it was really good. Like, it was just
Yeah.
good wrestling. And moving on from that, we come to, speaking of just good wrestling, we come to
Oh man.
probably what would be considered like just the pure wrestling match of the night, and
Yeah.
that is the Bastard Pack versus Will Ospreay.
Oh my
And
goodness.
if
What
anyone is at
a
all
show.
familiar with the Bastard Pack or Will Ospreay, then you would have been hyped out of your mind for this match because you
Yeah.
know you're about to see something incredible in the ring.
Yeah. And it was just that. Um I even like the way it started. Of course, Pat gets into the ring, Osprey's in the ring, the audience is losing it, of course.
Hmm.
Um and
Yeah, the
they're
the
all
crowd. Yeah,
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, the crowd was absolutely like losing their minds over this. But like,
Yeah.
obviously, the people at AEW All Out are familiar with Pac and Will Ospreay and know that this should be just an absolute mind blowing banger. Like
Yeah.
this, just to give it like a fine, like quick summary, this would have been I think this was probably match of the night. Like the Bastard Pack and Will Ospreay were going for like a 10-star match,
Yeah.
and I it's mind blowing how talented these two individuals are, and putting them in a ring together is just outstanding. Like I already am looking forward to the next time Pack and Osprey meet up because it's insane.
Yeah.
But
Uh
you were saying,
the 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 fact that they were so evenly matched, especially in the beginning. AEW loves doing the runs in the beginning to show the skill of excuse me, to show the skill of each wrestler. So we have I don't know, what was it, corkscrew dive?
yeah,
I think
yep,
Pac does that, and then Osprey does that back to him. Uh they're knocking each other around back and forth, and there were so many times that Pac countered a move that Osprey was doing that, I mean, we had
yes,
to like just I wrap my brain around how fast these counters were happening, and Osprey did
yeah,
the
yep,
same. But I mean, it was just Pac is such a like hugely muscled guy, and he's so fast, he's so agile, and
hmm,
his counters were just, man,
insane.
I can't stress
Yep.
enough how
No,
amazing both of them looked in that match. Like Will Osprey is cutting some of the best. He's having some of the best matches in AEW that I have seen
yep,
in
yep.
freaking years. This
Yeah.
guy, like I want nothing but good things and good health for him because it's amazing to see him, and he is taking his body to the edge almost every night he's out there, and it's
Well, he's
amazing to see.
on top of giving such stellar performances, he's being a real workhorse to boot.
Yeah,
Like, he is booked on as many shows as I think they'll allow him, and he seems like he's hungry and he wants to go, and he's trying to get as far as he can while he's hot, and he's hot with the fans is what I mean,
yeah,
and while his body is still intact. Um, so yeah, it was absolutely insane. The counter wrestling is a good point that you made. Like,
yeah,
I think Osprey on several different occasions, Pac absolutely countered with like an amazing, like a Dragon Rana, and a very forceful one to boot. Like, anytime he got put up in like a power bomb position, or um, even setting him up for uh, the move that he does that is a double underhook lifted onto the shoulder, and it has the same
yes,
setup as if you were going for the Tiger Driver 91, but instead of holding him vertical, I think, what is it, Stormbreaker? Yeah, that's it. And so, like, there was a point where a power bomb got countered by like a really vicious Dragon Rana, and then Stormbreaker got countered into a Hurricane Rana, which I didn't even see that coming, because from being on someone's shoulder, I'm not like immediately thinking, yeah, that's Hurricane Rana counter time.
yeah,
And then there was another point where if I remember correctly, Will Ospreay got him up again in kind of the powerbomb position. And when Pac was going to attempt to counter, he like threw him off so that Ospreay ended up behind Pac, and instead Pac counters into a poison Rana. And I'm just thinking, this
yes.
is insane. Like, how do these guys even have like working necks at this point? It's
You
insane.
so I think I know the part you're talking about because if I remember correctly, so he countered into a German suplex, right? And then there was a poison Rana.
I think so. I'm struggling to remember it entirely, but I do remember that it was like the one poison Rana that Osprey gave to Pac after Pac had hit him with like two of them, and not counting the one
Yes.
where Pac had just attacked him on the entrance ramp, like on the Dynamite before, while he was talking smack with Ricochet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Osprey had eaten a couple of poison ranas and whatnot. So it was nice when Osprey finally got like his own, poison rana off on Pac. And this match was so even and so over the top that it was fantastically down to like whoever gets it. It was one of those matches where whoever gets their finisher off, like at a certain point in the match, is going to be the one that wins.
Yeah.
And it ultimately ends up being Osprey who hits the hidden blade and retains. And
Yeah.
this, at the risk of repeating myself, this is match of the night right here.
I want to. Now he tried that hidden blade. Like he tried it at least one other time
Mhm.
because he tried the hidden blade and then Pac countered. It did a rebound German suplex or something
Something like
insane,
that,
and
yeah.
yeah, and then Osprey he kicked either he kicked out because I think he did for like a 2 count or something like that.
Mhm.
Whatever the case, he had been trying to get that hidden blade. He had been trying to get that hidden blade off.
Yeah, and Pac just wasn't having it. No,
But
this
then
was
he
very much a match. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm sorry. Just I was just gonna say that hidden blade. He tried the hidden blade, and then that's when Pat gave him another poison Rana. And
Mhm.
shortly after that, that's when Osprey finally gave him that poison Rana to shake his bones.
Yeah. I mean, it was just a back and forth like I haven't seen. Um, it's a match that basically is just one long string of like 20 minutes of highlight reel. Like it's all high spots, high spot
Yeah,
after high spot after high spot, and it's just I'm blown away. Like it every time I see a match that Osprey does that I think is like the best match I've ever seen, I'm like, I don't know how he's going to top it. And then he just finds another way to have one of the best matches I've ever seen.
you're not
Now, when I
wrong.
call this match of the night, I'm saying like for just pure pro wrestling, like maneuver for maneuver, counter for counter, two very well matched opponents, that's match of the night. Now, AEW is going to have a couple of different, like, probably the best match you've ever seen, but this would be the best pure wrestling match of the night. The other ones are going to be like street fight brutality and probably the most bloody thing I've ever seen.
Yeah,
But for
that
just pure wrestling, like if you wanted to teach somebody what is pro wrestling, this would be like this is what it is at its absolute apex.
yeah, you are not
Is
wrong.
what the Bastard Pack and Will Ospreay brought to it. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of wrestlers out there that like to say they're the best in the world. When Will Ospreay says it, he's the only one I don't scoff at. Like he really is, in my opinion, probably the best in the world. And in that being the case, it means the Bastard Pack is the second best in the world because they were neck and neck for this one.
I mean, I just want to point out at the very end of that match, Osprey went from an Oscutter to a Stormbreaker that was reversed into a Hurricane Rana by Pac. I mean,
Yeah. Yep. It was counter into a counter, and that happened a few times in that match. So these guys are insane.
yeah. And finally, he gets the hidden blade after that. And I don't blame.
Yep.
Look, he was probably thinking, I have to stop this man now before it's too late. If I'm doing an
Yeah.
Oscar and I'm like, okay, Stormbreaker, and he's like, Stormbreaker, nah, I don't want the storm to end. Hurricane Ronica. If I could say that right, please. Hurricane Rana. There it is. Woo.
Yep. So yeah, in summary, match of the night.
Yeah,
Absolutely a plus top tier rating for this match. Just
absolutely.
it is one of probably well, I mean the whole night was good, but there was definitely the opener and the main event, and this is like your middle main event, and it's not even these aren't the ones I've just cited aren't the only great matches on the card. So
Yeah,
when I say that All Out was the thing to watch over the weekend, and that it was an absolute like the show on a whole is top tier. I mean it.
yeah,
With that said, I don't know that I can. I mean, I could probably gush about Osprey and Pac's performance for the entire rest of this episode, but I think I've said all that materially needs to be said here. This was
yeah,
just a banger. Moving on, we then have Willow Nightingale and Chris Statlander, and I know that when we were watching that, and this is another grudge match, by the way. This is Willow and Stat have bad blood between them.
yeah,
But I know that when they started it, coming out after Osprey and Pac, we were like, "Oh man, this is going to be a tough act to follow." You know, I hope it's a good match, but I feel bad for them having to come after that.
yeah,
Well, I ended up eating all of those words because Chris Statlander and Willow Nightingale gave us one of, if not the best, street fights that we've seen from any women's division
yeah,
across AEW or WWE. Usually, when I'm watching like a street fight, and WWE can have some really lame street fights. I refer back to what was it, Shinsuke Nakamura versus I think either Seth Rollins or
I
or uh,
think it
or
was
uh,
Cody.
Cody Rhodes, and
When
their street fight was them walking up the entrance ramp like about halfway and then coming back, and I'm like, that's a street fight,
and that
really?
was it. That was it. Yeah. Oh boy. That one was
So
bruh.
this is one of those areas where I just don't think, as far as what you can do and what they will do, I just don't think WWE with its programming can compete on this level when it's something like a street fight or a death match with
Yeah.
AEW. And the ladies took full advantage of that. Willow and Chris went hard on
Yeah.
each other in that match, and
I mean, right from the beginning, we were getting Death Valley driver attempts. We were getting
mhm.
hitting, like, beaten with chairs. I think Statlander gave Nightingale a power bomb on the announcer's table, right? And that's like the
Yeah, yep,
beginning. That's like
yeah.
the
That's
beginning of the
that's
match.
early on. Yeah, no,
Like,
this
we just
wasn't
started.
a slow build. These
No,
ladies
they didn't
brought
take
it
time to
immediately.
slap each other gently. No, 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 no. There was no getting in each other's faces and talking smack. Nope. The time for talk was over.
Yeah, and there was a brutal moment where Statlander had Willow on a regular table after, I mean, announced table aside, she set her up on a regular table and went to hit a swanton, and Willow got out of the way, and
Yeah,
Statlander took a heck of a bump just coming through the table with no one there.
yeah,
Although I do think she ended up crashing her legs down on top of Willow a bit. I don't think
yeah.
Willow got completely clear of the wreckage, but that was just a brutal landing. And as bad as that was, it wasn't even the worst one that Statlander was going to have before the end of the night. Um,
No.
I mean, they just brought it. There was a point where they ended up uh,
Yeah, they ended up
going
going out on
up
the
the
ramp.
entrance ramp
Yep.
and beating each other up there. And
She gets Statlander gets Stokely to go get the trash can from the bag. It's got a whole bunch of
yep.
weapons and stuff in it.
Hmm.
Um,
But then Willow ends up grabbing a whole
a
bunch of
light
like
tube.
fluorescent light bulb tubes and just absolutely plasters Statlander with them, which is where you're getting some of the early blood, right?
Yeah.
Because now there's little cuts all over Statlander.
And
And
then
go ahead.
we're just gonna keep because I mean, guys,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
was a really good match. And
It
then
was a really good street fight.
the Statlander's like, "Cool story, bro," and this spears Willow right off the stage, uh, into a whole bunch of tables that are set up down there.
Into some tables. Yeah, and it was
Yeah.
fantastic looking. Um, then once they make their way back to the ring, Statlander pulls out a bag of metal thumbtacks. And this is the spot that I was saying might have been the worst for Miss Statlander.
Yeah. Ooh.
Because she pours all of the tacks out, and then she runs towards Willow, and I think she was trying to maybe either do a kick or was trying to do some sort of split like leg
Yeah.
drop,
I
but
don't know
she
what she was doing, but
she ends up doing a front splits onto the tacks. And this ended up leaving her with metal thumbtacks all through her inner thighs and butt cheeks and possibly other more sensitive areas.
Burp.
This is not, yeah, this is not the bump you want to take on some thumbtacks, and yet
No,
Statlander did.
no, it was not a good time.
And to sort of compound it, immediately afterwards, I think Willow grabbed Statlander up for a Death Valley driver also into the tacks, so she gets them
Mm,
good and proper into her back. And oof. Um,
yeah. Boo.
then I think that ended up with like a 2 count, and then Statlander kicks out and grabs Willow up and tries to go to the top rope. And her ascending to the top rope, like once Willow was up there, is where you get a
Mhm.
really good view of just how many tacks made their way into like her upper thigh and butt. And it's just
Yeah.
like we're looking at it and we're like, oh my god. She has tax in some very private and sensitive areas.
Yeah,
That looks
it
awful. And you
it
get a
hurt
full
my
view of her
soul.
bleeding back. It was ferocious.
Yeah.
But oof.
I mean, and so excuse me. Finally, I think Statlander wrapped a chain around her arm. Uh, let's not even let's not forget about the time that Willow bit Statlander on the cut on her head from the light from the light bulb. She bit her on the head and she spit something out. We didn't
Yeah.
see what it was, but something got spit out.
Yeah,
Um,
there's lots of bites on the head that occurs in AEW, but that was one of the few where I recall that the wrestler who gave the bite then spit something of substance out, and I
yeah.
was like, "Oh man, did she just bite a chunk out of this woman's head?"
Ooh, yeah, that was rough. Maybe she got a piece of glass and she was doing her a favor. Um,
Oh, I don't know that I'd want to grab that with my teeth though.
yeah, she was gentle. I don't look. I just work here. I don't know. But there was a discus lariat, uh, from Statlander. Um, Nightingale was like, nah, um, nah, bruh. I think she ended up choking Willow out for the win. I think after she did her Saturday Night Fever,
Yeah.
uh, she gave her the choke out, and that was that.
Well, and
And
I think the chokeout was just elementary at that point. Like it was just not even required. But again, this is a grudge match
yeah,
because I mean Willow is a both of them are relatively big women, right? Well muscled
yeah,
women. But Willow is not a small woman, and so I was particularly impressed, especially after such an arduous match, that
yeah,
Statlander was able to even hit Saturday Night Fever on her as well as she did and
yeah.
on then went on to choke her out with the chain for the win. But the Saturday Night Fever, I think, was all that was necessary. The choke was just bonus at that
I
point, just
agree.
because she wanted to.
Yeah, and it really felt like they wanted to hurt each other, so that was good. Again,
Yeah,
this was another match that had a good story, really good
mhm,
storytelling, and the progression
yeah,
of the story. I like the way it's moving, and I think before we watched this match, I had said to you, and we both agreed that Statlander needed to win this. Like she needed the win here.
yeah. Well,
Um,
in order for the feud to, I think, move in the right direction, like it can't just always be Willow catching the one up, right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it was time for Statlander, in order for it to maintain any kind of heat and for both wrestlers to maintain credibility, Statlander needed to take this win.
Yeah.
And what I think was even better is that Willow had chased Stokely away from the action. So like when they had gone up there and Stokely had been asked to bring the weapons, Willow chased him away with the broken fluorescent lights, like which at that point was like a broken bottle that you could stab someone with. And
Yeah.
Stokely was gone for the remainder of the match after that. So not only did Statlander catch the win here, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, she beat Willow clean. I mean, as clean as you can get in a street fight, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it was good because it keeps the feud having some vitality. Because if one just absolutely is dominating the other, then it loses all heat, right? Like with the
Yeah,
fans.
I agree.
So it would, yeah, I agree with you. It was good that I mean, they did a really good job. Much the same way that we were talking about how it wasn't time for Garcia to beat MJF
Yeah.
believably in the match, but he still got to kick MJF's ass. This was very well booked and very well produced as well. And both women just gave it absolutely everything. It was amazing.
Yeah, I agree. Freaking sweet. It was great, yeah. Yeah, we it had a lot of the street fight elements. You had your trash cans, you had your chains,
Hmm.
and like the formula is good, but I mean, if it ain't broke, why fix it, right? So I think they did a really good job, and I liked it. It's good.
Yeah. No, it was every bit as brutal as it needed to be, and both women gave absolutely their all to the match. And again, heck of a spot having to come out there and perform immediately after Osprey and Pac.
Yeah,
And to that end, Nightingale and Statlander kept the momentum going for the fans. I mean,
yeah,
it was absolutely not the come down that I thought it was going to be after that. So the hype is still continuing. Um, Absolutely fantastic match. Well done to both Statlander and to Willow Nightingale. Moving on from that match, we're then treated to a backstage promo where Will Ospreay is having an interview and indicating that he's happy to have retained the international title, but he knows Ricochet was watching. And
yeah.
that immediately, of course, as is the case in pro wrestling, you say, a potential opponent's name and magically they appear.
Yes,
So
Ricochet has entered
Ricochet,
the chat.
yeah, Ricochet appears and starts saying something about like he hears Osprey talking all this mad shit. And
Like he
Osprey,
wasn't though.
no, he wasn't. And he gets in Osprey's face telling him he'll see him soon. And man, oh, that's another one. Like,
Yep.
if Pac and Osprey was amazing, Osprey and Ricochet is another one of those just dream matches
Yeah.
where the acrobatics and athletics are going to be. Um, and so I'm really hoping they get a chance to build more with Ricochet. I mean, he's only had a couple of matches since he's been with AEW, so I would like to see how Ricochet kind of unleashed ends up evolving. But
Yeah.
I definitely think we're in for a future banger with Ricochet and Osprey.
Yeah. And he's yeah, like you said, and just to reiterate, he's looking real good here. Again, in AEW, so far it's looking like it's suiting him just fine. And every match we've seen him in so far, I think he's won, so that's good. I like that. Um, and I would love to see those two in the ring.
Yeah, I
There are
fully
lots
agree.
of people in AEW that I would like to see Ricochet go up against. So I'm
Yeah,
excited.
there's definitely a deeper roster of high flyers, like credible high flyers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Kind of like when we were talking about in one of our earlier Raw reviews, we were talking about how WWE doesn't seem to really know how to get the most out of their like luchadors and high flyers. And Ricochet's an excellent example of that. Ricochet absolutely could skyrocket to the top of the card here in AEW, where he was only
Yeah.
ever going to be mid card in the WWE, and that's
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah. It is.
I do think, and again, I love both products. They just have differences. So
Yeah.
there's pluses and minuses to each. And one of the pluses that I think is definitely in AEW's favor is the wide variety of different styles and different wrestlers who are going to get a shot to do well. It doesn't seem like certain styles are like guaranteed to only ever hit mid and low card. Whereas
Yeah.
in WWE, it kind of does. Like it seems very difficult for high flyers and luchadors and whatnot to get where they need to be versus like like I think WWE definitely favors like the more power style.
Yeah.
Um, and I love the power style. It's my favorite, but it's really nice to see high flyers, luchadors, and technicians all having a place there.
Yeah.
And it could reach the sky. Um, so I really like that about AEW. The variety of different styles and builds and performers that are being given a chance to showcase their stuff is one of their strong suits for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of reaching for the sky.
Speaking of reaching for the sky, the next match is the Continental title fatal four way between the defending champion Kazuchika Okada versus Konosuke Takeshita
Mhm.
with the Don Callis family.
Yeah.
and Orange Cassidy, who is freshly squeezed, and
Mm-hmm.
Mark Briscoe, the Chicken Man.
Get the hell up out of here, Jack Perry.
Get the hell up out of here, Jack Perry. I still to this day think that needs to play at the beginning of every time Jack Perry comes to the ring. They need that soundbite of Mark Briscoe telling him to get the hell up out of here, Jack Perry. Mark Briscoe
Oh
has
man,
gotten over so much of late,
he's a national treasure.
especially since putting them together in the conglomeration, which is just a wonderful grouping of like four of like just really fantastic faces and performers.
I feel
And
like
so
Briscoe. I feel like Briscoe came up with the name for that group.
I think so. I think it was his word for the day.
Was it?
Word for the day is
Okay.
conglomeration, baby.
Oh my God! Is it?
Yeah. So they are the conglomeration. And I think the
Oh my
tensions
goodness!
that they were trying to spark here with this particular continental match is I think they want to enter into a long feud, or at least maybe a feud between Konosuke Takeshita and Kazuchika
Yeah,
Okada.
I
But you
think
also
so.
had the tension of the fact that this is a fatal four way, so it's every man for themselves. And so you've got two members of the conglomeration, and so they were teasing that there was going to be some tension there, um, at least in the build-up. And this ended up being just a nice, like a really good showcasing match. Like you had Orange Cassidy and Briscoe working together. You had Takeshita pretty much beating up everybody whenever he had the chance
Yeah,
because
Takesha
he's
is a beast.
huge.
Yeah,
And you had Okada, like, it's a great dichotomy because you have, like, all of this raw physical talent. Like Konosuke is a powerhouse. He's tall and he's very strong and could,
yeah.
like, easily throw anybody in that ring around just based on pure physicality. But on
Hmm.
the opposite end of that, you have Okada, who has absolutely showcased like his new personality, like where everything is like bitch, and he's middle fingering to the crowd. I mean, his personality is really popping, but he really comes across as the smarter wrestler in the match. Like he's
Yeah.
very good at playing possum and luring
Man,
people
he's
into
so good at
traps.
playing possum. Yeah, I think
And
Okada's probably my favorite. I think he's probably my favorite from. Where is he from? New
from New
Japan?
Japan,
Yeah, I think he's
hmm
probably my favorite. Um, and that's not taking anything away from Takeshita. He's awesome too. But
yeah,
I like both of these gentlemen. But Okada is probably my favorite. And watching his development in AEW is looking good. His
hmm
character development, I should say, it's looking real good.
well,
Um,
he's got a slyness to his ring style, like
it's
he's a
so
troll.
Ric Flairish kind of
It
like
is, it is.
very reminiscent and so good. He's so good at
Mhm.
it. And I think I even I think we even mentioned or we commented on that when we were watching the match. We are just watching how good he was at feigning injury or
Yeah,
feigning,
suckering
being
people
out of
in.
it or
Yeah,
yeah, and then just as quick as he was like, uh slumping over, just as quick as he was doing that, he's got somebody up
mhm.
trying to make it rain.
Yeah. And so I really appreciate that about Okada. Like the, it was great to see that you've got this young but very physical Takeshita, but now
Yeah.
you've got this. And I don't want to make it sound like Okada is like got no physicality. He certainly is a big guy and hits hard as well,
Yeah.
but he also has the veteran experience, and they really did a good job of making that manifest. Because
Yeah.
almost every time Takeshita, kind of lost the plot or got taken advantage of, it's because he doesn't have the experience. He's got the size for sure, and
Yeah.
I feel like they told that story in this match very well. Like
Yeah.
that, Takeshita is a beast for sure. We watched him brutalize all three of the other opponents in this match, but he can get outsmarted by a veteran like Okada. And someone like Orange Cassidy, who's also a very sneaky wrestler. His whole shtick being that he lures you into a false sense of security by being so nonchalant, and then he smashes you with like a stun dog millionaire, and you're like, "What happened?" Um,
Yeah.
so just an excellent match all the way around. That ultimately culminates in, I believe, Okada drilled Orange Cassidy with the Rainmaker.
Yep. And
And
that was it.
I think this is another case where it was produced incredibly well and then it was booked well, because I feel like the overall, like there's usually a couple of stories being told in concurrence with some of these matches. And with four competitors, there's several stories intertwining. They teased at Orange Cassidy and Mark Briscoe being from the same faction but going one on one, but that never really manifested because they never really turned on each other the whole match, which was good. It just showed you something about, Mark Briscoe and Orange Cassidy and the conglomeration.
Yeah.
You also saw the beginnings of a feud with Okada and Takeshita, and
Yeah.
that was fantastic. But what I think was the most important thing, because Okada's currently with the Elite, and I think what they wanted to convey is that Okada hasn't lost a step by being with the Elite heel faction. Like, he doesn't have to cheat to win.
Nope.
So Okada not only stood his ground and kicked a lot of butt, but he beat clean Orange Cassidy, who is one of the winningest wrestlers there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's shown time and again that Orange Cassidy is extremely difficult to defeat, and he's no slouch of an opponent. And his win record shows that. And Okada just straight up hit him with the Rainmaker and got the 1-2-3 on him. And I
Yeah.
think that went a long way to solidify and kind of tell the audience, Okada might be with the heel faction, but my man can get it done on any night of the week. There's a reason he's with the Elite.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like it was great for that, because it helps. I mean, internationally, Okada has all the credibility in the world, right? But
Yeah.
here, since he's been in AEW with the Western audience, I think it was a good point to reinforce that Okada is one of the best in the world at this.
Yeah.
And he's good. He can go and he can beat anyone on any night. And I
Yeah.
feel like it did a good job of that too.
Yep, it did. Yeah. And I I'm okay with him winning. It was a well fought victory. Uh, and I'm sure Orange Cassidy is okay with taking the L, taking the pin on this. Like you said, he is one of the most winningest, winningest uh, wrestlers in AEW. So that's awesome. Uh, Takeshita needs a belt now. I mean, I don't know whose belt, I don't know what belt, but it's time to put a belt on that man. And that's
Yeah,
really the only issue that I have, and it's not even an issue with the match. So I have no issue with the match. The match was great, but let's put a belt on Takeshita. Come on, let's
I
go.
agree. And I think we're getting there. And I think it could even be part of the story is, you've got Don Callis rolling around saying Takeshita's the ace, talking
Mhm.
about how he
Mhm.
beat Kenny Omega 2 times in like a month. And Takeshita is very, very good. And so I agree with you that it's time, for some gold to find its way around Takeshita's waist. And
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe this feud that's building between Takeshita and Okada, and we'll mention more of that when we cover Dynamite this week.
Mhm.
Maybe that could lead to that,
Yeah.
But I agree, Takeshita is good enough and just a great competitor that it would be good to see him grab some gold,
Yeah. Well
even though he's
deserved
with
gold.
the walking thumb of Don Callis.
True, but gold. Get some gold on that man.
Get some gold on that man. Yeah, absolutely. And that was a fantastic match. It certainly wasn't necessarily to the degree of some of the earlier matches that we had seen, but it was solid. And I say that to say what happens next was not solid. What happens next is probably the worst match of the night. and
Oh.
that is the TBS title match between Mercedes Moné and Hikaru Shida. And
Uh.
just to reinforce what I just said, unfortunately, this match felt very phoned in from both competitors. It also didn't have any heat. So, like Hikaru Shida being Mercedes Moné's opponent didn't really have the same kind of buildup that, like, at least the earlier match with Dr. Britt Baker did on the previous pay per view, All In,
Yeah.
and it just didn't do anything for me. I mean, it very much felt like a match that I could have watched on Rampage. It
Yeah.
just didn't have
True.
anything. There was no meaningful storytelling, and it wasn't a great match. Hikaru Shida's not been looking too good lately. She looks like she is swollen. But neither one of their finishers look very good. You and I have talked at length about how Mercedes Moné's what
What
is
is it
it, the
called?
Monet Maker or something like that?
Is that what
Yeah,
it's called? The
the
Monet.
Monet
Yeah.
Maker. The Monet
It's
Maker,
lame.
it doesn't look like an impactful enough move to be someone's finisher. And unfortunately, because Mercedes is a relatively small and thin woman, when she tries to do it to opponents that are significantly larger than her, it looks like she barely pulled it off, and it just doesn't look like it has the impact to finish anyone. And
Yeah.
even
It
when
it
she's up
looks
against
bad.
someone who's closer to her size, it just doesn't
Yeah.
look like that strong of a move.
Nope. It
Um,
looks bad, and it keeps looking worse. Like, but she won't let it go. Why? I don't know. It's just it's not. And I'm just
yeah,
gonna. I can't even joke about it. I am not a fan of Monet. Not even a little
yeah,
bit. Um, I don't think she's a great. She used to be great. I think she came to AEW, and now I'm just gonna say it. I think she's just fucking cashing a check now, because all of her matches are lackluster. It's like she doesn't really. I don't know. She comes in there with more acting attitude and less wrestling chops. So I'm not impressed at all by any of her matches
yeah.
so far.
And
Like they have
and
all been yawns. And I know that she can go. I've seen her go. Has she been a great wrestler, like the greatest? No. No, but I've seen hunger, and I've seen a passion from her in the
yeah,
ring. I have not seen it since she's come to AEW.
yeah. And it felt like a low effort, low energy kind of a situation. I mean, there were
Yep.
a couple of spots that were okay, like
Mm,
Sheeta hitting three straight Falcon arrows was pretty good as a response to the Three Amigos, but that's about the beginning and end of it. Most of the rest of the match, it was a whole bunch of very low risk, very low effort, like a whole bunch of strikes, and the default maneuver for anyone who is of small stature is an excessive use of the Meteora. And I
yeah.
feel like you know how we used to complain about Claudio doing the European uppercut to an excessive amount, like we get it, dude, we get it. But I feel the exact same way about Mercedes Moné's use of the Meteora. Like that feels like it's 70% of her move set.
Yeah.
And other than that, it was just like a whole bunch of like slappy kick fighting. And then eventually, you get to the Monet Maker and the Katana, and both of those were like that's almost like number one and number two for the worst finishers in AEW.
I agree. And didn't
Um,
sorry, okay.
I was just gonna say the Monet Maker we talked at the beginning of why it doesn't look good, but Hikaru Shida's Katana looks like garbage as well.
Yeah, it's
It doesn't look very impressive, and it often lands on like somebody's shoulder, and it's one of those moves where it's a weaker move than something you probably did earlier in the match. So why is this your finisher? Your finisher should be your most dominant and destructive move. And I'm sorry,
yeah,
a little like ballet plie into a weak looking kick on the shoulder, just it ain't enough. It ain't good. It's a
yeah.
terrible finisher move. So it was a low effort match with not very many high risks in it. And this stands as complete dichotomy to what we just saw Pac and Osprey do. Like what we saw Pac and Osprey do, MJF and Garcia do, and Statlander and Willow do was like pushing the envelope, like trying to go next level. This match seems almost like a slap in the face to their efforts because
Yeah.
it was like the most amateurish junk. And I mean, I'm sure some people are going to think, man, you're going hard in on this. That's because it
I
was
mean,
that jarring. Like, this was the match to fast forward through.
yeah,
It was
this
so
is the one to go
bad
to the
that it's an.
bathroom, if you have to, or you need to refresh your drink. This was the opportunity to do so. Go take a shower, put the kids to bed, whatever. Because this match was lame, and I don't even know how we got here. If I remember correctly, Sheeta, uh, she had a match with her last month and lost that.
Oh, yeah, that's another good point. Yeah.
She
So
so how do we
Sheeta
get
wanted to
here? How
go
do we
again,
get
I guess.
how
Yeah.
how do we get from you losing that match to I want another title match? And remember how I said that it would have been a bad look for AEW to bury MJF and have him lose another pay-per-view. Remember that?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
you remember how he didn't?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I guess they were cool to bury Sheeta because they were just like, yeah, come
Yeah.
over here again and lose. And maybe that's why she was half-assed at it. Maybe she was like, I don't want a freaking job for this. This is bullshit. Maybe that's why she was just kind of, whatever in it. But I don't know. But I don't know how we
Yeah.
got here is all I'm saying. I don't know how we get to another match the very next month where you again lose. So what am I gonna see you? Am I gonna see you in October? You gonna
Yeah.
be here for a rematch?
Well, that's a very good point. Like anybody who's been following along knows that she'd already lost to Monet once, and now we're just doing this is like rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
So not only did it have no heat and felt thrown together, but it's like we've seen it before.
Yeah.
So on the storyline front, this has nothing going for it. On the in-ring
Nothing.
action front, it had nothing going on for it. And
Yeah.
the phoned-in half-ass performances in this particular match is a slap in the face to the rest of the card that was trying to like push the boundaries on what you think of when you think of wrestling.
Yeah.
The absolute animosity and heat of the MJF match pushes like a grudge match a little too far. Like it's like, man, this is a
Yeah.
little crazy. And it does the same like later when we get to Hangman Page and Swerve, there's a couple of boundaries that are being pushed there. And you've got Osprey and Pac pushing the boundaries on like what a 10-star match should be. People are out there going 6-star match, and Osprey and Pac are like, hold my 10 stars. So for this kind of a low effort, just trash performance, it really does or it should offend the rest of the people on that card that were absolutely putting everything on the line, like their bodies, they were 100% in, whereas Mercedes and Hikaru felt like they were 10% in. They were definitely all out. They were checked out.
Yeah.
And you hate to see it. These are two women that sit at the relative top of the card in AEW. That's another problem in the women's division, is that you have two women that are sitting near the top of the card, and this is the performance. There, that was all I wanted to say. It just makes me sad for the women's division in AEW, and this was definitely not of the caliber of what Statlander and Willow had just performed earlier in the night.
If there are limited spots for women, then I would have much rather seen damn near any other two women in the ring that night. A Hater would have been way more entertaining. Where's Abaddon? Queen Amanada would have been way more entertaining. Mariah May would have been more entertaining. I mean, like there are so many other women that could have gotten in that ring and
Hmm.
gave us a bang up performance. And the highest paid woman in AEW comes into the ring and shows
Yeah.
us all why she should
Nope.
be the highest. But no, she didn't. She didn't. She didn't at all. Absolutely didn't.
No.
And she hasn't yet. She hasn't yet. She comes out and she does her stupid dance. She comes out and I swear to Christ, I think it's more about what she's wearing. She's more about a fashion show. Which, by the way, how you gonna wear Zelina Vega's outfit?
Oh, right.
Like you are
Yep.
literally wearing Zelina Vega's outfit. And what was the robe about? What was the very baggy kimono robe that she came out with that matched absolutely nothing that she was wearing underneath? And then you go backstage and you ask for what? The Zelina Vega treatment? And why was your hair the exact same color as Zelina Vega's? I mean, what are they good friends or something? Maybe hey, if they're buddies and she was like, yeah, wear my outfit, girl.
Well,
Cool,
you
but
did. That's a good point. You did point out that her outfit was like startlingly, not identical, but like close enough to make you see the connection between what Zelina Vega had worn over in WWE. When was that? Was that for when they were in Puerto Rico?
man, that was like I think that was like I know
Yeah,
it was in
and it made sense.
2023.
It made
I
sense
just
when
don't remember
Zelina
what it was
wore it
for,
because
but
Puerto Rico has the same colors as the United States. And
right.
I think Mercedes Moné was wearing like a United States one. And maybe I missed it because you also pointed out that like her entrance robe was very much a kimono. And it's like, okay, why? And
Yeah.
so you came out in a baggy
What are we
kimono,
doing?
which I don't know is. I'm not sure what to make of that. Like, were you making fun of Hikaru Shida being Japanese?
You just call it I guess you can call it a trash bag mono if you want. Yeah, and then she did that I guess
Yeah,
mockingly
so was she trying to
bowing.
make it like Japan versus the
Uh
USA, and so she was mocking Japan and repping the
oh,
USA?
is that what she was doing, girl? That's
I don't
stupid. You're
know
stupid.
because it
I'm
wasn't
sorry.
obvious at all. It was just weirdly conflicted looking. Like she comes out
Girl.
looking like she just came out of Japan, but then when she takes the robe off, she looks like she's trying to portray Wonder Woman. So I was confused by what she was trying to say, I guess, or statement that she may have been trying to make.
I
But
mean,
it,
I can't figure it out either, but and maybe that's what she was doing, but the hair color, if she was going for that look, then, why not have a blue that matches the blue that you're wearing? Instead, you picked the blue that Zelina Vega had in her hair when she wore that outfit.
yeah,
So, I'm super confused by it. But then again, maybe it was a shout out. Maybe it was a weird shout out to Zelina Vega for some reason. And I'm
yeah.
pretty sure Zelina Vega's like, don't be shouting me out when you wrestling all lame and shit. Don't do that. So
Mayhaps because
send her a note card.
this is the dark mark on an otherwise perfect pay per view. Like this,
Yeah. Yeah.
you had mentioned like of the new Judgment Day. If they took Carlito out, what would be lost? If they took this match out of All Out, it would probably be one of the best pay per views in the entire world, like ever. Like it was a nearly flawless pay per view, except for the blight that was this match. It was that bad. And
Yep.
it was bad on every level it could be bad. It had no storyline build up. It was thrown
Yeah.
together. The performers gave their absolute lowest effort,
Yeah.
and it was confused on every level, right down to like Monet's outfit even. So
Yeah. And instead of spending time making Queen Amanat a job to people, how about giving us some really good like I know you can do it. You started out giving us Statlander and Willow, which that match was so good. So I know
yeah,
that you know what we want. I know that you know.
yeah,
So why are we wasting our time with this?
and
What is this?
that's a very good point. Like clearly there's some other producing and booking going on. That, or like, I don't know, some of these women just can't step up. It's got to be one or the other, because they clearly know how to give us what we want with all these other matches, which is why this one
Yeah.
sticks out like such a bad sore thumb. So
Yep.
whoever was producing and booking on that match, and Monet and Sheeta, probably all need to be pulled into the office for a stern talking to, because it's like I said, it's an embarrassment to all of the work that the other performers put on all night to give us banger matches, that this was so bad. And so
Yeah.
everybody involved with this being such a freaking shit show of a match needs to have a stern talking to, because that's just terrible. And you've pointed out that Monet is known as being the most highest paid woman on the roster. And
Yep.
like you said, for the limited number of spots that the women's division has, and the fact that there are just straight up more talented women than Mercedes Monet and Hikaru Shida, I mean, unless they want to
Yeah.
step up, I feel the same way about Britt Baker. I think her in-ring performances are freaking terrible. Um,
Yeah.
so they all need to come up. I don't care if you're legacy like Britt Baker, or if you've been there for a long time like Sheeta, or if you're the highest paid woman on the roster. If you're stinking the show up, you got to get better, or you got to go, because you have
Yep.
people like Will Ospreay and the Bastard Pack, and as you called out, Queen Aminata, who is busting her ass to try and get on the main roster and get a
Absolutely.
come up, and they keep making her job for anybody who isn't on Ring of
Absolutely.
Honor. Uh, if you're not going to step up, then get off, get out. Get out the way,
Yeah.
because you're holding not only the performers that are like S class, like best in the world, back and stinking up their performances by being on the same show with them, but you're holding back all of the other talent that is hungry and wants to be in that ring and doesn't want to just phone it in and give the lowest effort and pull the biggest paychecks. This
Yeah.
is like, it'll come up later when we get into what Mox is talking about, like with his little very cryptic comeback, without too many spoilers, but that's exactly who he's talking to, like, needs to go,
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
suffice it to say, this was the worst match of the night. Like,
Yeah, I don't think that's an
offensively so.
exaggeration at all. Yeah,
No.
that is not an exaggeration. It was a very, very bad match. And had it been the match that came right after Osprey and Pac, I don't even know what I would have done. That would have been such a tonal shift. It would have been such a change
Yeah.
that it probably would have brought down the energy of the build of the place after Pac and Osprey. Like I think it would have muted the just overall dynamic, like just superb match. I think it would have brought it down some had that been the match that came after.
It would have run all of the audience's momentum and hype into a brick wall. And it still did that. It just didn't do it after being quite so high as we were after that. But I mean, there's nowhere. This match has no place on this card. Make no mistake. Like, just because it could have been placed in a worse spot doesn't mean that it wasn't still like an absolute momentum and energy killer. Again, this is the match that you should have fast forwarded through. It's the match you would have gotten up to go to the bathroom through. And honestly, it's the match that should never freaking happen again. Like, if AEW is trying its best to improve its product, then here's a spot that just needs cuts, because that was so bad, like unforgivably bad. Especially when you've got other people that are trying their damnedest to give AEW their everything. This is an insult. This is a slap in the face for them.
Yeah, and there are hungrier women backstage.
Yep.
You can't tell me that there isn't. And then you come out and half-ass. And I mean, I see where all the money's going. It's just, it's all about the outfit, except for it All Out, where I don't know what was going on with the outfit there. But I mean, every time I see her, it's a fashion show of this and a fashion show of that.
Yeah.
Like, I never really, and I mean, and almost as if to emphasize how bad things are. Now she's got muscle. Just let that wash over you.
Oh, Camille, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, now
Just,
she's
just,
got
just
a
take a
bigger
second.
henchman. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
the champ has a woman. So even when she comes out and like, let's say somebody's talking some smack or something, and she wants to get her revenge on that person. Yeah, she just sends her muscle in there. And now listen, I know factions do it all the time, right? I'm not giving her any crap for that. I'm giving her crap because before she's even proven herself, before she's even gone in there and done anything to dominate, she sends the hired help.
yeah, she's got a
And
surrogate.
and that's the problem. See the difference. Roman Reigns didn't. He doesn't need. He didn't need Bloodline
Yeah.
to go in there and do his fighting. He didn't need them to do his dirty work or take care of his lightweight. He
Yep.
didn't need it, but he'd send them in there. But if he was in the ring by himself, you damn sure best believe he
Yeah.
would destroy.
Well, the difference being, of course, is that Roman Reigns all by himself can put on a hell of a match. So,
That's exactly yeah.
it's the same as what we were talking about. How like when MJF hits somebody with the diamond ring, it's irritating because he didn't need to do that. He's good enough that he
Yeah.
did not need to do that. And
That's another one. Yeah, that's another great point. Yeah.
yeah, and I think this is a harkening back to like remember when we first started watching AEW a couple years ago. We were looking at it right when MJF had Wardlow as a minion. And
Yeah.
this would be not dissimilar. It's not dissimilar to when Shawn Michaels had Diesel as a minion. The difference
Mhm.
being is that MJF had established that he can go. Shawn Michaels had
Yes.
established that he was Mr. WrestleMania, you know.
Yeah.
So we know what we're getting there. We've seen maybe 2 or 3 matches before they basically have somebody who can do her wrestling for her because she can't. I don't
Yep.
know why she is so terrible in the ring now. And you had made a comment the other day about like the reason that they ended up going heel with her is that they initially wanted her as a face, but her arrogant attitude or something like that was making her a heel. Well, at this point,
Yeah.
if I'm not cheering for her, it's not because she's a heel. It's because she sucks. She's terrible at this. Like I was
Yeah.
so excited when we finally were going to have Sasha Banks or Mercedes Moné as she's called
So
now
was I.
find some place to come back to, because we were relatively shocked. What was it, a couple of years ago now when both Naomi and her just walked off of WWE,
Yeah.
and Naomi is killing it over there now. I mean, she's fantastic, but she always was.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Mercedes comes over here, and it's like, are you a secret WWE plant? Are you trying to sabotage AEW because you're awful? Your in-ring
Yeah.
is bad. You're
You're awful.
You're cutting a promo isn't very good either.
No.
It's just bad, and it's like you're the highest paid woman in sports entertainment,
For
and this is what they're getting for that. You know that going forward, Tony Khan is definitely going to reconsider, name recognition for anybody wanting, because he's already gotten burned on CM Garbage Punk. In case no one's already certain that I'm not a fan of his, guess what? I don't like CM Punk. But he already got burned dealing with CM Punk's lame ass. And now he's getting torched for buying into the hype that was Sasha Banks / Mercedes Moné. And it's just like,
Yeah.
man, you have got to clean up your women's division because, as I said earlier in the podcast, they all have pluses and minuses over at AEW and WWE. There's some things WWE does better. One of the things WWE has absolutely AEW's balls in a vice grip is that WWE's entire women's division is better than
True.
some of the best at AEW's. Now, a few exceptions. Tony Storm and the timeless Tony Storm and Mariah May angle was like next level. That is absolutely amazing. And again, tonight, or not tonight, sorry, when we watched All Out, Willow Nightingale and Chris Statlander definitely stepped up. They did really, really well. But those
Yeah.
are outliers. The bulk of the women's division really could use a lot of help, especially when it's like people like Britt Baker and Sky Blue and some of these other women that show up and their performances are not very good. Some of them look like they wish they were anywhere in the world besides in that ring. They all look super nonchalant, and several of their moves are low effort. When they run back and forth in the ring, it's all prancing pony and like it's watching a match in slow motion, especially after we've just seen the guys going to like gear 12. And so they're all going to
Well,
have to super step up. And
I,
this
I
being near the top of the card is not a good look. This is very, very bad.
I would take Sky Blue out of that. I think Sky Blue, uh, she is not my favorite, but when in the ring, I think she does a pretty good job. Her personality, the character that she has, is kind of like what's happening. Because to me, it just looks like she just doesn't care. Like she
Yeah.
just has a nonchalant look on her face all the time.
Hmm.
Like, I want to be here. Like in her head, she's always answering what you are saying with a snarky remark. That's what her face looks like. Um,
Well, maybe
and
that
that's the
contributes to the overall illusion of because when a lot of the women get in there, a lot of their stuff seems more choreographed and it's slower paced and it's lower risk compared to some of the other stuff going on, with again exceptions. So to also look nonchalant or look like you're half-assing it when I'm already thinking you're half-assing it just doesn't help your case.
yeah. Uh, and I agree with you there. But I'm saying I think maybe that might be what the problem is with her, because I mean, if I were to separate that and look at her in ring work, I'm okay with it. I think she's pretty good. Um, I
Mm.
see. So the women's division in both WWE and AEW, they both need help. And they both rely heavily on, I mean, some of their best, which I mean, I don't blame them. Like WWE relies heavily on Rhea Ripley, and they should, because she is well on her way to being the Hall of Famer goat, of our time. She's well on the way there. But if I were to think about the women's division in WWE as a whole, I think it needs just about the same amount of help as AEW's, because we had Pure Fusion Collective. I mean, that'd be the end of my the end of my rebuttal.
Well,
There are lots of women over there that need just as much help, I think. The
I
problem with AEW
mm,
though is is that they keep regurgitating the same. Remember when it was Tony Storm and oh god, uh what's her name? Soraya,
yeah,
and then
another
Ruby.
example.
Remember that group?
Yeah,
Like, to me that's Pure Fusion Collective.
yeah.
Like I see them as the same. So I see the same problems being reflected in WWE as I do in AEW, is all I'm trying to say.
I do, but I see it to a much lesser extent. Like I could sit here and go down the roster of the women in WWE, and there's almost no like absolute blights on the roster like there are in AEW's. Like you just cited Saraya. That's another one where name recognition was the reason for the hire, and what's happened with her.
Oh
Like
my god, you're absolutely
she's got
right.
zero.
Oh,
So they pick up Saraya, and that's petered out into nothing. Like
yeah, she just
like
screams at
that is
people.
just trash at this point. And you've got
She calls them
Mercedes
cows and
Monet.
slags.
Yeah. Meanwhile, if I look for just 2 seconds over at W, like I struggle to find the few diamonds in the rough on the women's side in AEW, whereas on the other end of WWE, I would have to try and cherry pick the women that I don't think are that good. Like on their worst day, Damage Control is better than anybody that's over in AEW. With the exception being like maybe Tony Storm and Chris Statlander. Um, so like the worst
I
of
don't think they're better than Willow. I don't think they're better than Abaddon. I don't think they're better than Queen Amanada. I don't. I think
I
those women would be better than them, or be equal.
I think there are some women that are definitely better in AEW.
Hmm.
That stand tall. The point that I'm trying to make is that like I have to hunt for who's showcased on AEW's roster that I think is good
Hmm.
versus who's getting like the showcase time and whatnot. Like Mariah May
Hmm.
is
Yeah.
excellent. Tony Storm is excellent. Queen
Hmm.
Aminata, I think, should be promoted to the moon. And the last time we saw Abaddon, she was doing great. And
Yeah.
contentious take here maybe for some people, but Nyla Rose is a lot better than they allow her to
Ah,
be.
Nyla. Yeah. Hmm.
Um, that said, there's almost no one in WWE's roster that doesn't perform regularly and better. Like the Damage Control versus the Unholy Union was a better match, and it was one of the ones that was not my favorite on that card, but it was a better match than this garbage we just saw from Hikaru Shida and Mercedes Moné. So a
Yeah.
relatively mid or bottom card match absolutely trounces what they're putting at the top of their women's card over here in AEW, and that's my point. Like I
Mm.
would struggle to think like who is terrible on the women's roster over there right now. Now there's stuff that I wish
Yeah.
could be done. I agree with you that there's far more talented ladies in Pure Fusion Collection than they're allowed to showcase. But in that situation, I think that's a booking problem because we know Shayna can go. We know, I think Sonya can go. She's just carrying a little ring rust from being out for a year. And Zoe is absolutely great in the ring.
Yeah.
She needs work on the mic. But all of those women have more potential in their freaking pinkies than what I'm seeing coming out of Mercedes Moné or Dr. Britt Baker or here lately Hikaru Shida. I mean, not
Yeah.
for nothing. You mentioned Sky Blue. Well, Sky Blue is on the shelf because she did, I think, an over-the-top rope move towards Hikaru Shida, and I don't know who screwed it up, but Sky Blue is on the shelf now after a match with Hikaru
Yeah.
Shida. So they really need to of the two companies who I think needs the most work on their women's division, AEW absolutely does. That doesn't mean WWE's women division doesn't have spots that it needs work, but it's starting from way higher on the improvement scale than AEW's. Theirs is it needs help. It needs a lot of help. And a big part of it might be that they need to clean up their roster. They need a better producer of the women's matches and some better booking. And Mercedes Moné is absolutely not living up to, the money.
No. Not even a little bit.
No. But there's no shortage of talented women in WWE. There is, however, a shortage of TV time and as good a booking as they probably deserve. Because my gripe
Yeah.
over there with like Pure Fusion Collection isn't that these women aren't talented. It's that, I don't think they're allowed to showcase it. And that probably
Yeah.
leads to the ennui where, we spoke at length about how, in some cases Shayna Baszler looks checked out. Well, probably because they've put their thumb on top of her for so long that at this point she's given up hope. But we know she can do better.
Yeah.
So it's not that this is the cap on her talent. Whereas I don't think that's the case with Monet and Baker and, what I've been seeing lately out of Sheeta. But for all I know, Sheeta could just be disenchanted with how she's being booked. So whatever the case, that could use a lot of work. And I remember we discussed how TV time is a precious commodity, and the women still take a back seat to the men because that's who get the eyes on the sport the most. So which one needs to come
Yeah.
first? More time for the women so they can get more eyes, or more eyes on the women so they can earn more time? I don't know what the answer is, but I digress. I just hope that they can improve it. And the takeaway is that Sheeta versus Monet was the blight on an otherwise pristine pay-per-view. And to that end, moving forward into the next match of the night, we have the AEW World Title, which is Brian Danielson.
Yeah.
Uh, and this ended up being a fair bit better of a match than I think either one of us thought it would be.
Yeah,
Because
sure.
here's another shocking take. I don't think either one of us are huge fans of either Bryan Danielson or Jack Perry, although we're more fans of Bryan Danielson than Jack Perry.
Yeah. I'm not really crazy about Jack Perry. Uh,
Get the
but
hell up
I
out of here,
do
Jack Perry.
have, but I do have, uh, a good thing to say about Jack Perry. And so when he was with Luchasaurus, right, and he was Jungle Boy, um, they were labeling him more as a high flyer, uh, where
Yeah.
he did lots of crazy jumps and flips and whatnot off the ropes, and he hasn't really done a lot of that now, and that's not a bad thing. That's pretty much that's my compliment. I watched him the other night, and we'll talk about that match on another recording. But just I'm just because I saw it in this match too, where he plays very well off of the other wrestler that he's with, and he also takes their strikes, their hits, uh, or he'll take their moves like a champ. He does a very very good job of selling moves,
He does so well.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and he's also one of those wrestlers that I like high energy, fast, like Will Ospreay, like running around, bouncing off the ropes, flying around like little ninjas. I love that kind of wrestling, but Jack Perry does a respectable job of slowing a match down and still keeping it somewhat entertaining. It looks
Yeah.
more methodical than it does boring, right? He doesn't.
Yes.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not like a. It's not like a. Oh my God, another arm hold, please. It's not that at all.
No.
It's. I get the. You know what I mean. I get the vibe and the energy of what he's doing. So it's more like a maniacal, methodical
Yeah.
approach. He picks the opponent apart, and I was surprised to see that I was enjoying it. So I'm not super crazy like up on Jack Perry, but I do want to say that I saw that and I thought he did a respectable job, and it looked good. He was looking good.
Yeah. I think there's two issues that I have with with Jack Perry and his performances. One, I feel like Jack Perry's had an identity crisis for the longest time. Like when he was Jungle Boy and then when he wasn't Jungle Boy. And so he's trying to figure out who he's trying to be. And now he's trying to be like somebody who would like the character he's portraying, you almost think he's like a skinnier, shorter Undertaker is the vibe he wants to go for. Like he wants to be treated or it seems like the vibe he's going for is that he wants to be considered a menacing power wrestler, but the problem is that he just doesn't have the body and the move set to back that up. And so I think he's a little all over the place. I mean, he's currently portraying the scapegoat character, and he's built like a high flyer, but he doesn't really do a lot of high flying. He's now switched his style up to be more like he does a bunch of striking. And honestly, it's like your character is a bit all over the place. Your promos are weird and all over the place. And his move set especially, and I'll address this more in Dynamite when Perry had a match there where it was really obvious, but a lot of his move set seems like he's just lifting Kenny Omega's move set. So he's doing a lot of V trigger and running knee stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, who is even Jack Perry other than like a whole bunch of stitched together concepts from other wrestlers? Like he doesn't feel cohesive yet, and he doesn't feel like he's found his identity.
Yeah.
But I can't disagree with what you're saying either, in that like it's not like he comes out there and he stinks up the place. He just doesn't put on a performance equal to what like they're like between the announcers and what Jack Perry is saying. It doesn't. There's a disconnect or a dissonance between how they're trying to portray him and who we end up with.
Yeah.
And I would like for that to not be the case, because that drives me nuts. When they're telling you one thing, but you're with your own eyes, you're seeing another thing, and it's like, quit gaslighting me.
Yeah.
And it's like Perry wishes he was a bigger badass than unfortunately he is. So it's weird. But that said, he did put on a solid enough match with Bryan Danielson.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like, this is one that didn't seem to have very much heat going into it, because it was kind of like, Danielson wins the belt and Perry says, "Hey, we had a match like a long time ago and now it's time for the rematch." And that's it. It's not like, "Oh, I hate you." Um it wasn't the grudgiest of grudge matches for the night, but it was a
Yeah.
solid wrestling match, and it was entertaining to watch, which can be an iffy thing for me with regards to Bryan Danielson. Like, I get why people are up on him as a personality, but his wrestling style is just not for me. It hasn't been as bad as like when we were watching back a couple years ago, and it really left a sad taste in our mouth. But he used to do a whole lot of, like, I mean, it's just strikes after strikes after strikes, and then like one or two submission holds and running knees. And so it's a very, again, what I would call kind of a low effort style,
Yeah.
and it's just not my cup of tea. And particularly back when Danielson was messing around with Garcia, trying to, like, you're a wrestler, not a sports entertainer. It was like their mission was to do these overly technical joint locking, like, extended hug matches, and those are so boring. Just to give an
Yes.
overview, I'm not super impressed in a sport where we know that there is scripting and that these guys are trying their best not to hurt each other. Play strikes and play submission holds are like the lowest hanging fruit for me. I am much more interested in seeing like big powerful moves and like acrobatics than that. So guys like Pete Dunne, who likes to do this finger fiddly crap, and Danielson, who does a whole lot of, strikes and submissions, is like the worst style for me to watch. Like, it's not for me. That said, Jack Perry and Bryan Danielson ended up doing all right.
Yeah.
There was some decent super kicks. They had some fighting outside of the ring that was pretty good. We did see, some neck breakers and some suplexes. So it broke up kind of the boring stuff for me enough that I
Yeah.
was like, okay, this is cool. And there is one submission that I think Daniel Bryan does that always looks extremely painful.
Yeah, I think I know
And
which one you're
it's
talking
not the
about.
label lock or cattle mutilation or any of that. I wish I could remember the technical name for it. It's the one where they basically are standing on the back of someone's knees, and then they reach down and grab hold of them, and then they roll over on their back with them stretched up in the sky. That
Not the surfboard?
no, no. That one
What is that
I
thing
don't
called?
I can't think of what it is, but essentially, like, there's no good way to manufacture another full-grown human just stepping on the backs of your knees, and then to stretch
Yeah.
them from that position. And sometimes it goes into either like a face rake, or the worst I've seen is when somebody puts a dragon sleeper on somebody from that position, and that's one of the few that looks truly brutal in terms of the submissions that I see Daniel Bryan employing, because that one I can actually kind of like see how that would suck for the opponent's knees no matter what, like, yeah.
Yeah.
um but after putting on a relatively good back and forth match with each other, of course, as anybody could have predicted from like space, you could see it coming. Uh, the Young Bucks come out to jump Danielson um, on Perry's behalf.
Yeah.
But then the BCC came to the ring and ran the Young Bucks off. Um, and that opened up a spot for Perry to get the jump on Danielson and hit him with a running knee or two. There was an excess of running knee in this match.
Yeah.
Like because Brian Danielson like really likes the psycho knee, and Perry has taken to using something that's in between the psycho knee and a V trigger. So there's a lot of running knee.
Lots of knees.
Lots of
Lots
knees.
of running. Lots of running, lots of knees.
Now I will say this. You mentioned Perry's selling ability. There was a couple of psycho knees that Danielson did that like shot Perry halfway across the ring on impact. That looked
Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
really made that move look extra super good. And the way the match ended up coming kind of to a close is Danielson ends up kicking Perry's fucking head off, to quote Danielson, with the BCC kind of trademark, I'm going to hold your arms and stomp on your face. And that ends up with Perry kind of crawling to his knees as Brian goes to the corner and sets up to hit him with another psycho knee. And Perry crawls to his knees and kind of sits upright like, give it to me, holding his arms out. If I recall, he may have been flipping the crowd off in two different directions while he did it, and Danielson just drills him with one last knee to end up retaining the belt.
If he wasn't flipping him off, actually he was doing it in his head. Like his eyes were closed, he was waiting, he was just giving him the sweet finger in his head. That doesn't sound right.
Well, and then the match really took off, right? Because it was a good enough match, but what really made it good was what happened afterwards. Now with the match over, we have Kill Switch coming into the ring behind Brian Danielson while he's celebrating. And
you're not gonna stop that.
No,
It's
Kill Switch.
You've done it.
Yeah, I've done it one too many times. Kill Switch lays out Danielson, and Christian Cage and the Patriarchy start heading down to the ring. And for those not aware, Christian Cage has the AEW equivalent of Money in the Bank. He won the what is it? The Casino Battle Royal, and that's what you get is an opportunity to cash in for, against anyone at a time of your choosing against the champ. But we then have Moxley show up with the other members of the BCC, Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta, and the bastard Pac is there.
Yeah.
And they basically hold off the Patriarchy's advance. Like Christian Cage was feeling bold until the odds were not so in his favor, and then they backpedal away. And so he's going to live to cash in that another day. And so then Moxley jumps into the ring and gives a hug to Daniel Bryan, and we're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I think we even said when we were watching it, because earlier we were like, is Moxley even part of the BCC anymore? Is Daniel Bryan, is the BCC breaking up? And then we have this like kind of solidified showing of the Blackpool Combat Club. And so we're like, well, I guess they're fine. And they're not, though, because then Moxley just lays out, I think, was it Moxley
Claudio.
or was it
Claudio
you're
just
right.
gave him a European uppercut just out of nowhere, and Danielson falls on his butt, and he's looking up like shocked, and then they just go in on him. And Pac is holding Wheeler, he's holding him back, who
Yep.
apparently had no idea that any of this was going down. So he's trying to get to Danielson, and they're beating the stuffing out of this dude.
Yep.
Uh, yeah. I think it ends with finally they all leave, and I think Claudio hustled Yuta's hair, like, get out of here, crazy kooky
Well,
kid. Like, what is happening?
there was a fair
Like, you're
piece
gonna
of
give him money for ice cream later too?
yeah.
Like,
Well, part of it is that Wheeler is obviously the youngest member of the BCC, and he was obviously
yeah,
not in on this turn of events, so he's being
no,
held by Pac back while he's like almost crying as they do what they do to Danielson. And it's worth noting, like after he got knocked down by Castagnoli, Moxley grabs a plastic bag and puts it
oh
over
yeah,
Brian's face and like starts choking
yeah.
him with it, and it looks like he's trying to kill him, so much so that the fans end up chanting, "This is murder."
Oh
And
yes,
I mean, it
this
goes
is
on
murder chant.
for an uncomfortably long amount of time. Like we're sitting here watching the bag like move in and out while Brian is trying to breathe, and I'm like, man, is AEW jumping the shark and saying, we've always pushed the limits. Well, here we're actually going to kill somebody on our pay per
Right?
view.
I was like, you guys are about to make us accomplices. We didn't sign up for this. I'm not
Right?
sticking around to sign nothing.
Right. The chant after this is murder should have been, "We are witnesses." It's like
Oh my
this is
god.
this is a lot. So they
Yeah, I'm about to
finally
catch me a 15 to 25. No.
so piggybacking on what you had said, after a bit they kind of get done and leave the ring, and then the medical team and the security are able to come and get the bag off of Danielson and give him oxygen, and it's like,
Yeah.
what just happened? So this match was good for being a good wrestling match, but it was even better for
The
visually
story
telling
progression.
some kind of story about how the Blackpool Combat Club has fallen apart and not
Yeah.
answering anything. It left
Yeah.
this was one of the matches, most assuredly, that would leave any AEW fan absolutely chomping at the bit to see what happens on Dynamite or Collision or
Seriously.
whatever's next, because you're just left with more questions than answers. And it's like, what
Yeah.
happened to
I
the
mean,
Blackpool Combat Club? Why did Moxley and Castagnoli turn on Danielson? And obviously Wheeler Yuta's not in on it. So what is the fate of the
yeah.
Blackpool Combat Club? So it was fantastic for that. Like that was the best part of the whole thing. And that's not to say that the match itself was bad. It's just that the story that came on the tail end of it was so good.
Yeah. Really good. Surprisingly good. Yeah.
Yeah, so and I mean, so many questions, like, because, where had Mox been? And now suddenly he's there. And it's like, what's
Yeah.
happening?
Here I am.
And, how is Pac affiliated with them? And why are they attacking Danielson? I mean, just so many questions and so few answers. And is Brian gonna be okay? Because like he got suffocated to death nearly. So it was very good. That was the big
Yeah.
question mark match, and fantastic. Just absolutely fantastic there with the storytelling, and giving us a reason to need to see this week's Dynamite and Collision and watch the. Will keep you. Updated as the story unfolds, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It was great. And that leads us into probably one of the most contentious matches of the night. The grudge match to end all grudge matches. No belts are on the
Yeah.
line. This is about blood and payback. And that is Hangman Adam Page versus Swerve Strickland. In an
Yikes.
unsanctioned, lights out cage match that can only be won by pinfall, submission, or knockout.
Yeah. Ikes.
I mean, when you're given those options, there's only one way this can go down. It has to
Yeah.
be by knockout. Um, so this stems back to a feud that started before Swerve even became the champion. And, Hangman Page and Swerve Strickland had that amazing, like, Texas death match that we thought we had seen. Like, this is the most deathiest death match we've ever seen. Like, we had
Yeah.
people getting staples in the face and drinking, drinking the blood of their opponent and choking somebody with a chain at the ring post so we're like, this is going to be like atrocious somehow. We just know it
Yeah.
because they're going to have
Yeah.
to try and one up that previous one. And so it's like, well, how do you one up that? Do you actually kill him? And we've already
It's
had the
just
crowd chanting, "This is murder." Well,
yeah.
spoiler, at one point in this match, the crowd ends up chanting, "Please don't die." So this is
Yeah.
this is what AEW was giving us at All Out.
Holy smokes. And I was afraid that Swerve and Hangman weren't gonna listen. I was like, yeah, please don't die. And they were like, maybe, who knows? Some classics came out. The staple gun came out.
Oh, the staple gun. That one was amazing. At this point, I
Yeah.
am convinced that Swerve Strickland is absolutely immune to the effect of staples. Like,
Oh God.
he doesn't seem like he even feels it anymore.
Oh God. That match was so the first one, the one that you referenced, where they were drinking the blood of their enemies and whatnot. That one I'm like, man, this is hard. This is hard to watch. I mean, not in a bad way. Not in a bad way. In just a this is so gory type way.
Yeah.
But this one,
No, this one.
I thought that one was bad. No, I knew foolish mortal.
Yeah.
I knew nothing back then.
Yeah.
Past me knew nothing.
I mean, depending on your definition of gory, like if you're talking about like liters of bloodshed, I think maybe their first match had more just blood, like pure this quantity of blood. But this match was gory in its own ways that we'll get to, and far more brutal.
Yeah.
The match opens up with Hangman, I believe, came to the ring first, and then Swerve gets down there and immediately jumps Hangman Adam Page. And this is all happening while the cage is descending, and Swerve is attempting to hold Hangman in such a way that the cage is going to come down on Hangman's neck. And Hangman, obviously not wanting to be decapitated by the cage, ends up pulling Swerve into the ring from off of the edge where he was being held, and tries to hold Swerve in that position. And they go back and forth with this until the ring is getting the cage is getting uncomfortably close to decapitating one or the other or both of them. And at that point, Prince Nana pushes both men into the ring to avoid either one of them being murdered by this descending cage. And that is how they started the match.
Yeah.
Relatively early on, they are just hammering on each other. Like you can feel that there is hatred behind the attacks between these two men.
Boy, howdy, yeah.
Whew, and it's not too long.
There was.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. Good. I was just gonna say they left nothing to the imagination. There was no there was at no point did I go, I wonder if they really hate each other. No. If they don't, they could be best friends in real life, okay? And maybe that's why it's so good. But whatever the
probably
case,
are.
the chemistry between these two is phenomenal. They do killer jobs to just goodness, and it really does feel like I'm like, man, somebody's gonna end up dead. Somebody's gonna kill somebody, and I'm gonna be a witness to it, and then I'm gonna need therapy. Like, can we even talk about the cinder block? Jeez Louise, the cinder block comes
Oh,
out.
we'll get there. We'll absolutely get there.
Oh, brr.
Because the cinder block is an old friend of Strickland's, and it
Yes.
definitely comes
Oh,
into play in this
God.
match. But kind of running the match down from where it began, they're obviously they're hammering away at each other. They're trying to throw one or the other into the cage, and I think Paige gets knocked down and maybe kicked in the head, and Strickland's looking at the weapons, but he takes too long, so he ends up German suplexed. And
Yeah.
that's when Paige goes over and opens up this like plastic carrier container and pulls out the staple gun. And
Yeah.
anybody who was familiar with the first death match between these two already knows that the staple gun is a staple. Um, so
Oh.
Paige tries to get Swerve with the staple gun, and he puts it into his chest a few times, and Strickland just sort of looks at him like he's dumb, like, and that's why I'm saying Strickland, I think, is immune to to staple gun staples at this point, because he took a fair few of them in the chest and whatnot,
Yeah.
and just ends up
Yeah,
laughing at
gave him
Paige.
the yeah, he gave him the
He gave him what? It cut out.
the cool story bro face.
Yes, and so then Strickland grabs the staple gun away from Page and like staples him a couple of times to get him down to one knee. And then Strickland had a picture of his family like in his pants, I guess. And he takes that picture and staples it to Hangman's face. And he stapled him a good couple of times in the face and on the cheek. And this ends up leaving Paige with like a gruesome bleed for the entire rest of the match over like his right eye. And so Paige is now a bloody mess. And, the picture gets ripped off of his face. And we're just like, oh my God,
Oof.
this is atrocious. And I think after that, there was some like a chair shot to Adam Page,
Yeah.
and maybe like a Death Valley driver or something into the cage, and Strickland's just choking the life out of him. But after like there was some vicious cage moves too. There were like after getting stapled in the back at one point, Page ends up kind of sliding between the ropes in the cage because Swerve tossed him there. He ends up sliding down the entirety of like a 5-foot drop with his back, which has staples in it, raking the like fence, the chain linked cage. And I'm just like, oh my God. And that's not even the worst of what's going to happen to Hangman's back as we proceed. Excuse me. Then Page at one point reverses it on Strickland, and at one point goes to the corner and grabs some barbed wire, which he wraps around his hand. And did he wrap it around his hand? No, he carried it over wrapped around his hand, but I think he ends up wrapping it around the cage wall. And then sends Strickland head first into that portion of the cage wall, which just rakes open his forehead. So now we have Strickland bleeding quite profusely. So they exchanged some chair shots in order for Strickland to be on the mat again after that. But then at one point the referee tries to step in, which I don't understand why. I mean, you're in kind of an anything goes. So because it felt like a weird intercession, like Paige was hammering Strickland with the chair so many times that the ref literally kept him from being able to pick the chair up off the ground again. And I'm like, that's a weird intrusion on the ref's part for this match where this is allowed. But that brief bit of distraction allows Strickland to get kind of back up, and the ref ends up on his knees between Strickland and Adam Page, and Strickland does a forward somersault off the top of the back of the kneeling ref that results in a buckshot lariat to Adam Page. And that was one of the damnedest things I've ever seen. Like, because I think earlier in the match, Adam Page wanted to go for the buckshot, but the space between the ropes and the cage wasn't enough for him to be able to flip. And now we have Swerve Strickland.
Great storytelling, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then we have now we have Strickland, who basically does I don't want to say a round off, but he plants his hands on the back of the ref and just does a forward flip into the buckshot lariat. And we were like, what? Oh. And that, of course, lets Strickland get the one up on Page, who then takes the opportunity to return the chair shot favors. And then I think he takes one of the chairs and puts it in the corner. Either he did or Page did, but there was a chair in the corner, and Page ends up eating all of that chair head first in that corner.
Yeah.
And that sets the stage for the aforementioned cinder block. Because
and then the cinder block of ouch.
The cinder block of ouch comes into play. Swerve goes over to that same box that the staple gun came out of and pulls a cinder block out of it, and you sort of see that was the only things that were in there because the cinder block ate up the space in there. But now you have a whole fully like a whole full size cinder block that Strickland is working with. And for a second there, we're like, what sort of sick, demented thing is he going to do? I'm thinking, he's going to set up a swerve stomp or something, or maybe, maybe a body slam or a power bomb. No, Strickland's like, nah, I'm going to vertebraker Adam Page into a cinder block. Now, a vertebraker on its best day is considered one of the most dangerous wrestling moves when you're doing it on a canvas mat approved for wrestling moves to be done on. Yeah. Like, it's done very rarely. Let alone one where a person vertebrates another person into a cinder block. And this particular vertebraker landed in such a way that the cinder block scraped the ever-loving hell out of Adam Page's mid to lower back. Just scraped it off.
Yeah.
And that's not counting the impact damage. That's just the scrape. I mean, like, he took a vertebraker to the spine on a cinder block, y'all. So, at this point, we're all, like, thinking that Adam Page is dead now. Oh, no. Nope. It takes more than that to quell the fiery vengeance of one Adam Page. Apparently had enough rage to survive that. So, Swerve's able to get a 2 count off of that, and after Page kicks out of that, they set up a table, and Swerve, I'm trying to remember how he set this up. There was a table, and I think Swerve climbed up to the top one of the corner ropes, and I think Page...
For a Swerve stomp, right?
I think... because the setup was kind of unique. I think Swerve was heading up there, and I think Page intercepted him. But then they sort of fight for a bit on the top, and it results in Hangman kind of falling to where he's sitting, facing the corner, but on the top ropes. And then he sort of is left to lean back, and so now he's over the top of the table that was set up. And from the top rope, Swerve stomps Adam Page through the table. And it was at about that moment that the crowd was chanting, "Please don't die."
Yeah.
Because, I mean, this was just like one of the most atrocious looking swerve stomps through a table.
Yeah.
And this is after Paige just got vertebrakered onto a cinder block.
Yeah.
So
And right after the swerve stomp, Paige just gets up and he does a dead eye. So okay, so he's like, yeah, cool story, and just gets up. Like his rage, he
yeah,
was fueled by nothing but hatred
yep.
and crazy eyes. That was it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, Paige took that vertebraker, kicked out of it, and then hit like Swerve with a dead eye. And then he grabbed a piece of cinder from Swerve's burned down house and attempted to stab him with it, like a sharpened
Yeah,
piece of cinder wood. And I mean, he's just going for a stab, and I'm like, at this point, trying to murder him. And so I think if I recall, Swerve ended up getting that piece of cinder back and then spun around behind Paige and then proceeded to like stab it into Paige's forehead. And I think
just stabbing him in the head.
that happened between the vertebraker and then the table and the stomp, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it was it was a swerve stomp, then the dead eye, then Hangman tries to get stabby with the cinder block, or
Oh,
sorry, not the cinder block, with the piece of wood,
yep.
and then Swerve's like, "Give me this," and then he stabs him in the head.
Yeah.
Stabs him directly in
Oh,
the head
yeah,
meat.
that's right. That's right. That happened after the Swerve stomp through the table. That's right. That's right.
Yes, yeah,
And that was insane.
and after that, after he stabs him in the head with it, Swerve is left emotional. He's looking at
Yeah.
the piece of wood,
He's reminded
and
of
he's
his burned
emotional
down
about it.
house. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
And while he's distracted being emotional over his burned down house, Paige grabs him up with a power bomb. And this, I thought the vertebraker looked bad, and it did. But Paige picks up Swerve and power bombs him lower back first directly into the cinder block.
yeah.
And I'm thinking,
Ugh.
that's it. It's done. Strickland is now going to be paralyzed. But somehow he's not. I mean, he just took a power bomb with his like all of his lower back into a cinder block.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And then
After that, I think Strickland is gets up and I think he throws him into the cage.
yep. Yeah, another
Like
big toss into the cage.
yeah, these men were I honestly think they were trying to kill each other. I think they maybe signed a contract before this match. Like I don't know what, but I honestly think these dudes are trying to murderate each other.
It sure looked that way. And I mean,
Yeah.
I remember the section, like, just it was section after section of like, this is so brutal. I've never seen anything as brutal as this. And then they're like, well, hold on, the match ain't over yet. Because yeah, after the big power bomb onto a cinder block, Strickland gets the one up again on Paige and throws Paige. I think it was like a power bomb into the cage, and it's another situation that leaves Paige kind of stuck between the ropes and the cage. And while he's there, he sort of kind of gets trapped, I want to say might be the right word, but he's kind of stuck in such a way where his head is just over the middle rope. And Swerve runs and hits a house call against the back of Adam Page's head that pushes him face first into the cage. So not only was it a brutal blindside house call, but it smashed Page's face into the cage.
Yeah.
And I think after that, he also hit him with a running knee once he came out of the ropes and tries to go for a pin, but only gets a 2 count. And I think then Strickland starts going to the top rope and looks like he's heading to the top of the cage. Like, I think this might have been the part where it looked like he was going to try and swerve stomp Page from the top of the cage. And
Yeah.
we're all like, oh no, no way.
Yes.
No way. And
Paige follows him up though.
yeah, Page runs up there before he can get too high up, and basically from above the top rope, like somewhere between the top rope and the top of the cage, Page grabs a hold of Swerve and does like just this massive avalanche power bomb to Swerve
Avalanche.
Strickland. And I mean, just drives him into the ring. And at this point, he found like the like millimeter of not covered in broken table or cinder block of ring mat to do it to him. But it's this massive power bomb. And then I think he goes from that into another Deadeye and gets a 2 count. And when that doesn't win the match, Page just proceeds to hit Strickland with a chair, and Swerve kind of tries to shake it off, like, you know, starts laughing again, but then falls over. So it's like the effect of all of these vicious shots is apparently having something. And at this point comes the segment of the match that is possibly the most contentious, or at least the one that's getting talked about as like, was this a line too far? Page pulls out a hypodermic syringe. And
after removing his grill, he removed Swerve's grill.
That's right. He sort of pulls Swerve up into a kneeling position and removes the grill from Swerve Strickland, and then takes a hypodermic syringe and literally pushes it through from the inside of Swerve's mouth. Like, he puts it inside of his mouth and pushes the syringe needle.
I hate it.
Out of Strickland's cheek.
I hate it.
And then proceeds to absolutely bash Strickland straight on in the head with a full force chair shot.
Seriously, it was a terrifying chair shot. Like, the camera cuts away. That's how brutal that is.
Yeah, and I mean, you could hear it, and Swerve just crumples at that point with like a hypodermic needle hanging out of his mouth and just out cold. And that is the finish to one of the most brutal matches I've ever seen, because that gets Page the knockout at that point. And, you know, they go ahead and raise the cage and start trying to give medical attention to Swerve Strickland, and we're all waiting for Page to like lose it and try and attack him some more. But he kind of didn't. He ends up leaving, and we're just left gobsmacked by this absolute feat of rage, hatred, and brutality that these two men have just depicted for us. Yeah. And I mean, those were all, like, every move in that match was a move that you could say, well, that's a move that's shortening their careers. Like, those were all moves that could have ended somebody's life that night, and somehow these men did it and lived to walk away. Well, at least one of them walked away. But yeah, that was how they one-upped their giant, like, I think Texas death match that set like kind of the new standard for Brutal, and they were like, well, here's a new standard for Brutal.
This is the new.
Ooh. Suffice it to say, you know how I said Pac and Ospreay was like a standard wrestling 10-star match? Well, this was like extreme wrestling 10-star match. Like you're watching one to see the athleticism and the technique and the acrobatics and, you know, just the showcase of what pro wrestling should be. This is a snuff film. Like, this is that level of extreme wrestling where it's like, did somebody actually die? Like literally, you've got the audience chanting, "Please don't die."
Yeah.
And it's just the most brutal stuff ever. So this would get like a 10-star on like extreme brutality wrestling.
Yeah. It was good, but oh, the so the hypodermic needle, weird to me. It was that one was weird. I mean, it was gross, but also just strange. I didn't understand why. I guess maybe it was just the shock value of it, but I could have taken it or left it. Honestly, it was just such a weird
Well,
addition.
I like it, or I liked it because it's one of those things that evokes like everybody's worst experience going to the dentist. Like,
Yeah.
if you've had to go to the dentist for any bit of work, then you know
Can we
that
not?
the least fun part is when they have to try and numb your mouth, which is what they use those needles to do. And so it evokes that, and it does so like kind of the same way as the fluorescent lights, right? Like, they cause a lot of little cuts in the tacks, same thing. A lot of little skin damage, but ultimately not anything that's going to hurt you too bad for too long. And this is that. Like, he got a needle put through his cheek, which is absolutely gruesome to see. And if you
Uh,
try and put yourself in his shoes for a second, you're like, oh, no, thank you. But ultimately,
mm-mm.
it's not going to be anything that Swerve can't heal up from relatively in short order. Like, it's all very superficial damage. What was far more brutal and a lot less superficial, like this is where people could end up needing to go to see the spine doctor, was stuff like the vertebraker or the power bomb on the cinder block.
Yeah.
Because those are some very bad bumps, and the key to making a bump not so lethal is to disperse the damage over a wider area. When you power bomb somebody on a cinder block, you are specifically minimizing what they're running into, so it all goes into a much
Mhm.
more contained spot in the lower back.
Yeah.
And same with a vertebraker. Like, it looked very bad, the scrape that it gave him, but you also have to take into account that his spine came down on the corner of a cinder block. So
Yeah.
those are the ones that I think
Ugh.
were most worrisome in terms of like these could have long-term repercussions because your spine is
Mhm.
getting jacked on these. Um,
Yeah.
but to that end, I was more worried about certain other moves, like the shock factor. You're right, but the damage was not that great from the syringe. I would be more worried about the chair shot that came after it, honestly,
Yeah.
because
Oh.
it's as if when the chair impacted with Swerve, it's like it loudly shouted concussion. Um,
Yeah.
because I mean, there's a reason WWE banned straight on chair shots to the head a long time ago, and this was a completely unprotected chair shot. Like, Swerve was kneeling with a syringe in his mouth and his arms at his side, and he just took it straight to the dome. So
Yeah.
those are the moves that I think people should be a lot more worried about. There's a goriness factor maybe to the syringe, but it
Yeah.
wasn't even close. Go
I
ahead.
wasn't necessarily worried about the syringe. I just thought it was kind of unnecessary. It was just gross. I didn't see like that. That's all. I wasn't worried about it. It just looked. I was like, why are we doing this? That's all. That was it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think specifically for the gory factor. I would think if there was a spot that people should find questionable in particular, like probably the syringe because they hadn't seen that a lot, and so it's got more shock factor. But what about like Mox holding a plastic bag on Danielson, looking like he is just making everybody a witness to a homicide, like in real time? That I think
Seriously.
was that might be the most like, oh, this makes me uncomfortable moment. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I mean, an absolute brutal match. And for what type of match it was, like if extreme matches with a lot of gore and stuff is anathema to your sensibilities about pro wrestling, then I guess I understand why that would probably not rate that high. But then you'd probably
Mhm.
also not be watching AEW at this point, because those kinds of, like, at times very extreme matches are like exploding barbed wire death matches is some of the things that put AEW on the map.
Yeah.
So this is in their wheelhouse. So unless you're a brand new fan and this is a first for you, this shouldn't be surprising. Although the degree of it that Strickland and Page had was pretty up there. Like, it was definitely pushing that bound. And that's kind of what I mean. Like, each match that was an absolute banger on this card, and this whole card with one glaring exception was an absolute banger,
Mhm.
was trying to push the envelope in some way. Like the MJF and Garcia match, I think, pushed the envelope of trying to give you a ferocious grudge match. And that was really good. Like, the storytelling leading into that was very good, and the pathos of the grudge was very strongly felt in that, as was the case in the main event. Obviously, huge pathos on a grudge match. Like, these are two men that have made me believe that they hate on a cellular level. These two men hate one another.
Yeah.
Um, but this final match also pushed the boundaries of kind of like what is too much for an extreme match. And I don't know that they got to too much, because I feel like both men were able to walk away, because for me the too much will be like when somebody probably dies. um but each of these matches were trying to push it in a similar fashion, although not to such a grotesque degree. Chris Statlander and Willow Nightingale pushed to the limit of what we had seen in a women's street fight, on in any league. Like, I've never seen such a brutal street fight between the ladies on either AEW or WWE than that one.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. It was amazing. Yeah.
yep. And then you had the great storytelling that left us all with more questions than answers on the end of Perry and Danielson. So there were some real bangers here, and some definite, like, of, I guess if you had to put them in different categories, like, this was the best of brutal, unsanctioned cage fight. Um, and Osprey and Pac was just the best of standard wrestling. So there was absolutely a lot going on that was incredible about All Out.
Yeah.
And to that end, um, I mean, I gotta give a top tier rating to that last match, and a top tier
Yeah.
rating to All Out overall. Again, the Mercedes Moné match with Hikaru Shida was an absolute stinker, but it was one poor match in a showcase of some of the best matches that maybe I've ever seen in certain respects, and an otherwise amazing card. So, absolute thumbs up to All Out.
Absolutely. Yeah. All the thumbs.
Yep. And was there anything else you wanted to add to it?
No, that was it. It was
No.
just a really good uh paid event. Everybody looked good except for that one match that we've already talked about. Um yeah, it was top tier. I said the
It,
thing. Ah.
it was top tier. All right. Well, that has been our coverage of AEW's All Out event for 2024. Sorry it took us a little bit of time to get it out to you. But I hope if it inspires anybody to go back and watch it, that you're as blown away by it as we were. And if not, then I hope we were able to regale you with it, with our podcast today. That said, I don't think there's a whole lot more to say Other than thank you for joining us and goodbye, and I'm going to go ahead and roll the outro. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Top Tier Wrestling. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the latest AEW and WWE news and shows. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. Follow us on social media for updates and to join the conversation. Until next time, everyone, remember, wrestling is always better when it's top tier.